Well, it's good to be back. Although last weekend I was just across the way, but it came to my attention that you guys got a real life-size picture of my weekend last week. So it was fun. It was a great time. Chelsea and I had a good time with the other almost 30 folks that we took down to San Diego, and it took almost a full week to get all of that mud out of my ears, and I didn't have any problems with my hair. Chelsea did. It was fine. I actually felt like a nice mud coat. It was good. It was like exfoliating, and I liked it on my head. I might do it again for that purpose. But it was a great weekend, but I am excited to be back and jumping back into these flyovers. And, yeah, we have 2 books, but, I mean, if you look at the length of them, it's not a lot to tackle. Shouldn't be a lot to tackle, but there's a lot of depth within both of these books that I want to make sure that we get a chance to cover. So we'll go through it at great depth, but you will be out of here at a normal time, so don't worry about that. But if you look at Habakkuk, we'll start with Habakkuk, of course, just the order that we're going to go in today. But if I had to do an award ceremony for the minor prophets, right? You think about school or high school, and you probably had an award ceremony that you would do. If I had to do an award ceremony for Habakkuk, he would win the most relatable award. He would win that because he is the minor prophet out of all of them that I think is the most like all of us. Right? He asked a question that all of us have asked at some point in time about things that go on in this life. And we wonder and know that God is sovereign, that he is in full control over everything that is happening. Every thought that happens, he knows it before it's even thought. Every action that happens, he knows it. Anything catastrophic that happens in this world, he's fully aware, and he is in control of all of those things. But for us, it can still leave us with that question of why or how does this make sense? And Habakkuk asks that question. And so I give him the award of being most relatable because all of us can look at what this minor prophet Habakkuk is doing and say, yeah, I get it. I get why you can ask that question. And he's the most relatable from that sense. It's almost like if I look at basketball, right? And many of you may not know this name, but Steph Curry is one of the most relatable people in basketball. And he's relatable because he's not a big guy, right? Here's a guy that is 6'1" on a good day, and I mean, he's unstoppable. He is unstoppable because he can shoot better than anybody that has played the game of basketball. And so it doesn't matter how big of a defender you put on him. It doesn't matter how fast of a defender you put on. You cannot stop him. He is going to do what he wants to do, unlike anyone else that we've seen in the game of basketball. He's relatable because most people look at him and say, I could probably be 6 foot, maybe, if I grow to be that tall. So I can do what Steph Curry does. And while he is so great as a basketball player, I can tell you as a coach of little kids, he's the worst influence on basketball. The worst influence on basketball. Why? Because these little kids don't even shoot a layup to practice their first shot. They come out and they fling it up from half court. Not even able to make a layup, but they shoot 10 threes. I just don't get it. And so you have all these people trying to be like Steph Curry because he's relatable, and yet they're not Steph Curry. So that's what Habakkuk fixed in. If I had to put it on the other side, people don't relate well to Shaquille O'Neal. Why? Because you're just not 7'1", 325 pounds. You just don't see that often, right? And so you don't see people saying, I want to be like Shaq, unless they're big. Unless it's like me playing Jay Wharton in basketball, then I want to be like Shaq, and I want to do that to him. But that's because there's a size advantage, right? The average person isn't thinking that because they're not relatable. Well, Habakkuk is relatable for all of us because he thinks the same way that we have thought sometimes when things go wrong or different than we would plan in our life. And so we're going to take a look at Habakkuk first and find out just the way he's thinking and why he relates so much to us. But then in the end, how he turns it, how we all should turn it in the end, if we do have these thoughts, back to who God really is. And God presents himself well in the entire Bible, but specifically in this book as he responds back to Habakkuk as they're having this conversation. But let's look at the background of it to understand a little bit more detail about the book. And the first thing that we need to know is the date. So I've dated it around 609 BC. And so 609 BC, of course, if you look at the graph that we normally use for each one, that gives us a date of when they were ministering and the kings that they were with. You see that Habakkuk is in the time of Jehoiachin. And so King Jehoiakim was basically forced into submission by Nebuchadnezzar. So Babylon is on its way. Babylon is in power right now, and they are about to invade and take over Judah. And so at this point in time, Habakkuk is on the scene right before, when things are at its worst, right before Babylon comes in to take over Judah. And so we put him right before that time of Babylon coming in around 609 BC. And yeah, 2 Kings 24 gives us that information, that detail about Jehoiachin and his eventual submission to Nebuchadnezzar as he's coming to take over with the rest of the Babylonian army. The time right now is a ton of injustice happening. Right, injustice is happening. Rebellion is happening. It's just a mess, right? It's a mess, and the prophet here is asking, well, why is this happening? Why is this happening? There's a mess going on right now, God, and you're not doing anything about it. There's crime, there's violence, all of this is happening. We are supposed to be your people. Where are you at? Where are you at? What are you doing? Why are you just sitting back? And so major injustice, rebellion happening during this time. And as I've alluded to, this book, as I said, is very practical and relatable to us because it's essentially not the prophet coming out saying, here's what's going to happen to a nation like we see with the other ones, but he's having a conversation with God. He's speaking to God, asking God, where is he? And God is responding to him with responding to his complaint that he has, giving him the detail of, look, you have no idea. You have no idea what I'm even doing. Your mind couldn't even wrap around the thoughts, or you couldn't even have the thoughts of what I'm going to do with Israel in my ultimate plan. And so that's the summary of it, but he is ultimately frustrated with God. Frustrated that God is not doing what he feels God should be doing at this point in time. And so you look at the structure. You have, of course, again, Habakkuk speaking, and then this sphere of blue is my representation of God. This is one of the hardest things with these keynotes is every time I have to, I'm thinking about God, I'm like, I don't know, what do you put? I don't know. I could just put God up there, but that seems boring, so I don't know. This is creative, I guess, a circle that's coming out. But let that circle represent God for this keynote, all right? But Habakkuk over here has these complaints, right? He's frustrated. And so it structures very nicely the book of Habakkuk. And complaint number one comes right out of the gate. First few verses, in verses 2 through 4, he gives his first complaint to God. Again, where are you, God? Why are you not doing anything? How many times have we asked that question? How could this happen? It doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense that this could be something that's good. That's his first complaint. Verses 2 through 4. Well, then, of course, God responds to that. He responds to the prophet's complaints and gives him a little bit of a taste of, you have no idea even if I told you. Right? Well, then that prompts another complaint, even further frustration that he has of God's response to his initial complaint, that he's got to come back with more. I got something else for you to add on top of that. Well, then God responds to that in a more detailed way. And it ends with a prayer of praise, a psalm of praise that Habakkuk is left with because he's just in awe. He's speechless about how God operates and how in control God is of every single molecule on this earth, in space, all of it. So let's look at complaint number one. Complaint number one, coming in Habakkuk 2 through 4. The prophet says this, "O Lord, how long shall I cry for help, and you will not hear? or cry to you violence, and you will not save? Why do you make me see iniquity? And why do you idly look at wrong? You're just sitting there. You're not doing anything. Destruction and violence are before me. Strife and contention arise. So the law is paralyzed. There's nothing happening. The law is not being abided at this point in time. Nothing is happening. And justice never goes forth. For the wicked surround the righteous. God, we're supposed to be your people. They surround us right now. So justice goes forth perverted. Here's what this throws up. It is the theological term theodicy. Theodicy is a compound Greek word that we have, is theos, God, and then dike is judgment, right? Punishment. And so that's the theological term that we're talking about here. He doesn't use this, but this is the question. The question of, if there's a good God, then how in the world is there evil? How in the world is there evil? It's the question that we've all had. It's the question that you've gotten from your non-Christian neighbors and your family members, is, if there's a good God, if God is truly good, then how is there evil? Well, that word is theodicy, right? Theodicy is that word that we need to define it as, even though you don't have to say that, but just know that. And yeah, here's the thing. If there's a good God, then why is there evil? But here's a little apologetics for that question in particular. It'll just at least get it off of you, because there's a lot of pressure when that question comes, right? You're starting to think like, where do I even start? Where do I even? And here's a great way to start. God did not create evil. It's the absence of goodness. Did God create evil? No, God didn't create evil. What is evil? Evil needs to depend upon goodness. And so in order for you to say something is evil, there has to be a standard of good. There has to be a standard of good, because evil can't exist on its own. Right? It's just like a wrinkle on your shirt. A wrinkle on your shirt doesn't exist without your shirt. Right? You can't just have a wrinkle. You don't say, hey, there's a wrinkle right there. No, it has to be on something. It has to be on your shirt. It can't exist without your shirt. Just like darkness can't exist, evil can't exist without goodness. And so when somebody says to you, how is there a good God without evil? Your response should be, how do you know what good is? Where are you getting your standard for good? Because there's something that you're saying is good. And we know that good is the standard that God gives us, that conscience that he gives us, that we have a right or wrong. We have an evil, we have a good, because he has placed that upon every single person. Every single person. So you know right from wrong, naturally. And you have to ask that question, where do you get that standard from, before we go there? Here's another example of it. I just gave you a little hint and jumped ahead, but same thing. God didn't create darkness. Well, what do you mean God didn't create darkness? He didn't create darkness. Darkness is not something that God created. God created light. He said, let there be light, but darkness is the absence of light. And so again, you can't have darkness by itself. It's just the removal of light. It's the removal of something that God created. If there's no light, in a sense, then you have darkness. But darkness is dependent on light. You see what I'm saying there? So all of these things have a dependence. Just like the only reason, again, you have evil, there's not evil that's created. Evil is dependent on the manner that you have a standard of what is good. And so the only way you can say, hey, that's evil, the fact that person stole that over there is evil. Well, if you ask that person, they may think it's okay because they have a reason to do it. But the reason you say that it's evil is because you have a standard of good. And that standard comes because God has given us that standard. And so there must be a God, right? That's where we get back to the beginning. We got to at least start there. Like, there has to be a God, because you can sit there and say that there's evil or there's good. So there has to be a standard of good, and God is a standard of good. God has placed a conscience in all of us so that we know right from wrong. And so we start there to say, okay, you can't be an atheist because you're saying good is good and bad is bad. So we at least have to say there is a God. And then that gets us to, well, what does God want from us here, right? And then we keep going into, okay, God's given us his word. And then God's given us an expectation for this life. We're all sinners. And then we get to the point that God has brought us a gift in Jesus Christ. He's given us salvation. He has redeemed us. And then he calls us all to love Jesus, follow Jesus. And so that is where the apologetics kicks in. But it starts off with that question. You can't say there's evil without saying there's a God, there's a standard. way off the path of what Habakkuk was talking about, but it's a great thing just for all of us to think through is that question that comes up because it comes up far too often. But here's Habakkuk's conclusion in chapter 1, verse 2 through 4. God's not doing anything about the evil that's happening. There's a lot of crime out there. There's a lot of violence out there. There's a lot of people that are hurting or suffering. These are God's people that he loves, and he's not doing anything. He has a problem with that. Well, God hears his complaint, and God responds to him. He doesn't have to respond to him, but he responds to him. He gives him a little bit of an answer to his question. He says this, verse 5, to respond. Look among the nations and see, wonder, and be astounded. For I am doing a work in your days that you would not believe if I told you. Verse 6, for behold, I am raising up the Chaldeans, Babylon, that bitter and hasty nation who marched through the breadth of the earth to seize dwellings not their own, right? They're about to take over things. They are dreaded and fearsome. Their justice and dignity go forth from themselves. Their horses are swifter than leopards, more fierce than the evening wolves. Their horsemen press proudly on. Their horsemen come from afar. They fly like an eagle, swift to devour. They all come for violence, all their faces forward. They gather captives like sand. At kings, they scoff. And at rules, they laugh. They laugh at every fortress. For they pile up earth and take it. Then they sweep by like the wind and go on. Guilty men whose own might is their God. Right? They rely on their strength. They're proud about who they are. I'm about to use that wicked nation, and they're about to cause some pain. You think you see pain now? Just wait. Just wait. So here's what his response is saying. God works in ways that are far beyond our imagination. Right? He said, if I told you what was going to happen, you wouldn't even believe it. It would blow your mind. But I'm going to eventually tell you, it's going to blow your mind. You're not even thinking this way because you're not God. All you do is look what's in front of you now, just like we do. Right? We look at what's in front of us now, not remembering that God is Alpha and Omega. Right? Beginning and end. He works on no timeline. You and I can only work on what we have in front of us. And he wants to remind them that. And it should remind us of a story of Joseph. Right, here's a great example in Scripture. Joseph. Right, Joseph is the coat of many colors, right? He's his father's favorite child, and his brothers don't like that. His brothers don't like that probably because Joseph touted that in front of them, which I never thought that was a great idea, but he did that. And so what did they say? We're gonna handle this. We're going to send him away. We're going to put him out to where he just goes far, far away, and we're going to act like he's dead, and guess what? Problem solved. Well, problem's not solved because God had a plan. And so you can do all of that you want to do, but God's going to even use those evil and wicked ways to continue to allow his will to move forward, his good purpose to happen. And so, of course, Joseph goes to Egypt, and he becomes this slave in Egypt, and guess what? Pharaoh's kind of like this guy. And so he promotes him up, and all of a sudden, he's the man now. He goes from being a slave into he's the man. And then what happened, right? Potiphar's wife comes in and is like, well I kind of like that new guy. He's kind of young, and I like him. Right? And then she tries to make a move on him, and he's being righteous, like, I can't do this. I'm out. And so she even flips that whole script to say, he did this. He was trying to abuse me. He was trying to take advantage of me. So what happened? He gets thrown into prison. In the lowest gates of prison. And then all of a sudden he starts working his way up, right? Working his way up into prison. And then we have these dreams, right, that need to be interpreted. And Joseph interprets the dreams. And he says, don't forget about me, though, right? When all this happens, don't forget about me. Tell them about me so I can get out of here, too, because I shouldn't be here. But what happens? He's forgotten. I get out of jail. I don't need him. But then all of a sudden, Pharaoh needs a dream interpreted. And then we need Joseph because he interpreted a dream. So then he gets back out. He interprets Pharaoh's dream. And then next thing you know, he's back, second man in charge. All of this is happening. They're thinking he's dead over here, that they've killed him. They've done away with him. But God is working, puts him second in charge to the point where they're coming begging. Their brothers that thought they killed him and they're begging and worshiping, in a sense, trying to get food from Joseph. And if you go back to Joseph's dreams, he said, I'm going to lord over you. And so he wasn't wrong there, right? He wasn't even wrong when he was telling his brothers what was going to happen, because it ended up happening. They come to him and they're begging for food and all this stuff, and he's the man. He's second in charge. He's the one that's determining who gets food and who doesn't get food. And so it actually happened. But again, all of this evil happened, and we know the verse at the end, right? They did it for evil, but God did it for good. God needed all of that to happen. God needed Joseph to go to Egypt. He needed somebody to get him to Egypt. So his brothers shipped him off to Egypt. They thought they were doing something good on their eye. God's working through that. Right? He was thrown in prisons. God's working through that. He was raised up and he interpreted a dream. God's working through that. He's second man in charge. God did all of that. And so all of this to remind ourselves, God is sovereign. God is sovereign over everything that happens and will use it for his good purpose. I'm sure when Joseph was in prison at that time, in jail, that he was probably like, something's wrong. Why, God? Why do you have me here? Right? Why do you have me here? But then let the story play out, because God is not time-bound. God is not focusing on our present alone. Right? He's working with unlimited time. Right? There's no time with God for his purpose to happen. And so that should be a reminder for us. But Habakkuk didn't take that very well. You know, I'm not buying that. Because you said Babylon. Babylon, the worst nation you're going to use? See what he says. Are you not from everlasting? It just baffles me. It's like, hey, God, let me remind you who you are, because you seem to forgot. Right? Are you not from everlasting? Oh, Lord, my God, my Holy One, question. We shall not die. You had a promise. We shall not die. O Lord, you have ordained them as your judgment, and you, O rock, have established them for reproof. You who are of purer eyes than to see evil and cannot look at wrong. Why do you look idly, look at traitors, and remain silent when the wicked swallows up the man more righteous than he? You make mankind like the fish of the sea, like crawling things that have no ruler, right? We have no protection. We have no ruler. You make all of us. He, Babylon, brings up all of them with a hook. He drags them out with his net. He gathers them in his dragnet. So he rejoices and is glad. He's just gathering up God's people, your people, and he's just mocking us. He's making fun of us. Therefore, he sacrifices to his net and makes offerings to his dragnet. For by them, he lives in luxury, right? He's living in luxury now because he's taking us, and his food is rich. Is he then to keep on emptying his net, mercilessly killing nations forever? Is that what Babylon's going to do? Is that what Babylon's going to do, God? I will take my stand, my watch post, and station myself on a tower and look out to see what he will say to me and what I will answer concerning my complaint. So you have this picture of Habakkuk. He's telling God who he is and what he needs to do and reminding God, you're not doing your job. Let me remind you of your job description, God, the one that created me, the one that created my brain, the one that it created the fact that I'm even having this thought. Let me remind you who you are. And once I tell you that, I'm going to sit and I'll wait to see how you respond, right? And so he's just sitting here. Like, think of the arrogance right there that he has of like, I'm going to tell you, God, and I'm going to sit back and wait how you respond because I got you, and you need to think about what you're doing, right? Habakkuk thinks he needs to remind God who he is and what he should be doing. And then, like this gentleman here, he's sitting there. Right? He's sitting there on the gates like, let's see, God, what do you got to say about that? Well, as you can imagine, God had a lot to say about that. Here's his response. Chapter 2, verse 2. And the Lord answered me. I love this. Write the vision. Make it plain on a tablet so he may run who reads it. All right, what I'm about to tell you, you don't just listen to me. Write it down. Make sure it's clear so you can go tell other people what I'm about to tell you. For still, the vision awaits its appointed time. It hastens to the end. It will not lie. If it seems slow, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. Behold, his soul is puffed up, right? Babylon is puffed up. It is not upright within him, but the righteous shall live by his faith. Moreover, wine is a traitor, an arrogant man who is never at rest. His greed is as wide as Sheol. Like death, he has never enough. He gathers for himself all nations and collects as his own all people. Right? He's talking about Babylon. Shall not all these take up their taunt against him with scoffing and riddles for him and say, woe to him who heaps up what is not his own? For how long? And loads himself with pledges, right? These woes are coming. These judgments are coming on Babylon he's getting to now. Will not your debtors suddenly arise, and those awake who will make you tremble? Then you will be a spoil for them. This is what's going to happen because you have plundered many nations. All the remnant of people shall plunder you. For the blood of man and violence to the earth, to the cities, and all who dwell in them. So here's the judgment that's coming for Babylon. Don't worry about Babylon. I'll take woe to him who gets evil gain for his house. Right? That's what Babylon's doing. To set his nest on high, to be safe from the reach of harm. You have devised shame for your house by cutting off many peoples. You have forfeited your cities, your life, For the stone will cry out from the wall, and the beam of the woodwork respond. Woe to him, again, judgment, who builds a town with blood and founds a city on iniquity. Behold, it is not from the Lord of hosts that the peoples labor merely for fire, and nations weary themselves for nothing. For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Woe to him, again, another judgment, who makes his neighbors drink. He's talking about Babylon. He makes his neighbors drink. You pour out your wrath and make them drunk in order to gaze at their nakedness. You will have your fill of shame instead of glory. Drink yourselves and show your uncircumcision. The cup of the Lord's right hand will come around to you, and utter shame will come upon your glory. You think you're in charge. You think you're all glorious and powerful. God's going to take care of it. The violence done to Lebanon will overwhelm you, as will the destruction of the beasts that terrified them. For the blood of man and violence to the earth, to the cities and all who dwell in them. What profit is an idol when its maker has shaped it? A metal image, a teacher of lies. For its maker trusts in its own creation when he makes speechless idols. Woe to him, last one, woe to him who is a wooden thing. Right? You're a wooden thing. Awake to a silent stone. Arise. Can this teach? Behold, it is overlaid with gold and silver, and there is no breath in it at all. But the Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silence before him. So in response to Habakkuk, he gives these 5 woes. He tells them that he's going to use Babylon, but he tells them, hey, don't you worry. I got all of this in control. I got something for Babylon too once they're done doing my work. They think they're doing their own work. They're doing my work. And because of their injustice and because of their crime, because of their punishment, I got something for them too. And here, let me lay it out for you what I'm going to punish them for doing. Here's the crime that they had, right? Unjust gain. Right, verse 6, woe to him who heaps up what is not his own. So you've taken something that's not yours and you've built it up and used it as it's yours. Right, that's unjust gain. He loads himself with pledges. Second woe that he gives, right, self-exaltation, verse 9. Woe to him who gets evil gain for his house, right? To set his nest on high, right? He's stealing, he's plundering, he's doing all this stuff to set his nest on high, to make him seem like he's high and mighty, that he can't be touched, that he's safe, no one can reach him. You've stolen, you've created this violence for your self-exaltation. God's got something to say about that, and he's going to judge them for that. Verse 12, foundation of sin. Woe to him, right? Judgment on him who builds a town with blood and founds a city on iniquity, on sin. You've built your whole empire based on sinful acts. God's going to do something about that. It may seem okay in the present time, may seem like you're getting away with it, but rest assured, God is going to judge that. He wants Habakkuk to know that. Number 4, woe that he gave here, verse 15. Woe to him who makes his neighbors drink. You pour out your wrath and make them drunk in order to gaze at their nakedness. Right? You're giving them alcohol. You're manipulating them so you can take advantage of them, so you can be violent towards them. You can do all these things you want to do. God's got something to say about that. Verse 19, last one, idolatry. Woe to him who says to wooden things, right? You have these carved images. You carved images, silent stones. Can they teach? It's overlaid with gold and silver and all these things. You make it look so prestige, and you make it look so dignified, it can't even talk. It can't even teach you what to do. There's no breath in it at all. And you're saying that's your God. God's got something to say about that, because God is a jealous God. These 5 woes, and it ends, of course, with chapter 3. As you can imagine, much like Job with his hand over his mouth. Right? He can't help but to sing praise to the Lord. There's no more complaints that he has because God has shut him up. Shut him up made him realize he's in full control of this. He knows his job description. He wrote his own job description. Matter of fact, he wrote Habakkuk's job description for his life. So don't tell me what I'm not doing. So he gives chapter 3 this praise, this psalm of praise. And it's written just like a psalm if you read it all the way through. But let me pull out a couple verses here. Habakkuk 3:2 at the beginning. "O Lord, I have heard the report of you, right? And your work. O Lord, do I fear? In the midst of the years, revive it. In the midst of the years, make it known. In the wrath, remember mercy." And so he's sitting back with saying, like, I fear you, as I should. I should fear God. I'm in that setting now. I get it. I understand you got something bigger than I could ever even think of. Right? Habakkuk is in awe after being exposed to God's sovereignty and power. He's in awe. He continues on. You went on, verse 13. You went out for salvation of your people, for the salvation of your anointed. You crushed the head of the house of the wicked, laying him bare from thigh to neck. He's seeing it now. He understands that the wicked's not going to get away. God is not delayed. God is not sitting by idly. God has not forgotten about any of this. He knows every single action that they do, and he's going to take care of that. But here's the thing that you should see here is you went out for the salvation of your people, right? For God's people, for the salvation of your anointed. Jesus is going to come through this line, and so in order for Jesus to come through this line, God has saved his people. But he has saved his people so that the line of the Messiah will still be there, will continue to happen, because God has a bigger plan than what's happening right now. And he's saying, this is salvation for your anointed, the Messiah that is to come. You have saved your people for that future time to happen. Habakkuk 3:16, I hear and my body trembles. My lips quiver at the sound. Rottenness enters into my bone. My legs tremble beneath me. Right? All of this stuff is happening, right? It's scary. It's causing me to tremble. I don't like it. It's painful. I see all of this violence. I just think it's awful. Sounds like a lot of what he was complaining with before, but look how he ends this. Yet I will quietly wait for the day of trouble to come upon people who invade us. Right? What is he saying? I'm at a peace now. I'm at peace. Nothing externally has changed. It's still bad. It's still violence. It's still iniquity. It's still all of that happening. But what's changed? His understanding of who God is and what God's plan is and what God is doing in this. And so, same thing with you and I. When we get into those settings of like, man, this is crazy life. How is this happening right now? How is this person sick? How is this person passed away? How did this tragedy happen in someone's life? How God, how would you do that? It's important for us to remind ourselves who God is and his plan that he's working on that will not be thwarted, and that's ultimately good, and that he has vision from beginning to end. Habakkuk has that at the end, and he can do nothing but praise, because no matter what happens, he knows God's in full control, and he knows God's going to work it all out for good. Last portion of that, to end it. Though the fig tree should not blossom, nor fruit be on the vines, the produce of the olive fail, and the fields yield no food. The flock be cut off from the fold, and there be no herd in the stalls. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will take joy in the God of my salvation. God, the Lord, is my strength. He makes my feet like the deer's. He makes me tread on high places. To the choir master with stringed instruments. Again, it's written as a psalm. But just think about that. Right? The prophet is now rejoicing. He's saying this beginning part, verses 17, like, what if I have nothing? I could have no flock, I could have no food, I could have no security, I could have nothing in this world. But I rejoice. I rejoice in the Lord, the God of my salvation. That's who I'll rejoice in. Such a great just interaction that Habakkuk had with the Lord. And again, it's relatable because you and I have had this interaction with the Lord ourselves. Mentally, verbally, whatever it is. We've had it at some point in our life. How, God? Why, God? This can't be right. But it's important for us to get back to that place as Habakkuk did. Look, if we don't have anything in this world and just have Jesus, we got more than enough. Got more than enough. Habakkuk got there. Right? He's talking about God, but we're on this side of the cross. We can look at it and say, we got Jesus, we got more than enough. Even if I don't have anything like Job, everything's taken away. I have my salvation, and I know this isn't the end. Such a great reminder. Key verses and takeaway. Let me take you outside the book of Habakkuk first, Isaiah 55, 8 through 11. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts. For as the rain and the snow come down from the heaven and do not return there, but water the earth, making it bring forth and sprout, giving seed to the sower and bread to the eater. And you just think about that, right? Sometimes we even complain when it rains, like, oh, man, it's raining here. 4 days out of the year in California, it's raining. I don't like it. It's messing up my hair, messing up my day. What am I going to do? It's raining. He's saying, you have no idea what I'm even doing with the rain. The fact that I'm bringing rain puts food on your plate at the end of the night. Puts food on your plate. You don't think about that. But my ways are a lot bigger than you getting your hair wet. Right? But he's saying it's far beyond that. So shall my word that goes out from my mouth, it shall not return to me empty. Right? Everything God says is going to happen, but it shall accomplish that which I purpose and shall succeed in the thing for which I sent it. God's word does not come back void. All the promises of Scripture that we have, you and I can read those and know, hey, this is true. This is true. It may not make sense to me. I may not be able to understand it, but I can trust that God is doing it for good. And it brings us to Habakkuk 2:4. This is such a great verse, and Paul uses this multiple times throughout the New Testament. Behold, his soul is puffed up, talking about Babylon. It is not upright within him, but the righteous shall live by faith. Right? The righteous shall live by faith. They're going to live by faith. They're not going to understand it all, but they're going to have faith to know I'm in control of this. Here's the takeaway I want you to have. God sees all, he ultimately controls all, and he's unimaginably at work through all. He sees all, he's in control of all things, and far beyond our imagination, unimaginably, he's working through all of it. Through the bad stuff that happens, through the good stuff that happens, every element of this life, God is working through it for his good purpose. Let us remember that, even in those times where we can think, God, where are you? Why did you do this? How does this make sense? We don't need to know. We just need to have faith that God is in full control, as he shared and told Habakkuk.